If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. I used to work as a bouncer at several different locations in the Toronto downtown area. I enjoyed working on the patio when I could, despite not being a smoker, because talking to people made the time go by faster, and hey, I'd always meet new people. There was this one place I worked at that always had crazy stuff happen. The patio was also a weak chain link fence with some tarp thrown over it. The club was so cheap, so the fence didn't cover the entire area, so I had to be watchful of people trying to sneak in. One time I was feeling lazy, and I stood in the opening with my back to the street. I was talking to people trying to kill time when I felt a guy stand behind me coming from the street. This wasn't too unusual. Some people get turned away when they see me, try to bribe their way through the patio entrance. I was having none of it, so I puffed myself up, determined to ignore him until he gave up on me noticing him. After about 10 minutes of this, I started to get a bit creeped out because the guy was just standing behind me without saying a word or doing anything. I turned around to tell him to go away, but stopped mid-sentence. This guy is a bit taller than me. I'm 6'2", kinda lanky, and this guy's well dressed. He's covered head from toe in blood, like drenched. I thought he'd been in an accident, so I dropped my tough guy act, asking if he's okay and if he needs an ambulance. He calmly responds he's good, and he just wants to find his brothers. I was like, you sure your brothers are here? He insists that they were, as they told him they'd be in X city, but not anywhere near Toronto where this is located. After his complete obliviousness to what city he's in, the fact that he's soaked in blood, and his intense stare where he doesn't blink, I decided to call my boss up. When my boss appeared, I gave him a quick rundown of what happened. He talked to the guy very briefly, then told him he'd assist. He went and got some patrolling cops. When the cops appeared, one of them lightly touched the blood guy on the shoulder. That's when he starts screaming incoherently, trying to slash at him with a small knife that he'd concealed. The cops, my boss and I subdued the guy until he could be cuffed and placed into a cop car. The guy was screaming loudly, struggling to hulk out of the cuffs the entire time. To this day, I still have no idea what the whole thing was about. I worked for 4 years as a chef in a nursing home. I typically left by 8 every night, but I would occasionally stay over and help the third shift janitors clean up and lock up the kitchen. I was leaving one night close to 11 or midnight-ish when the front desk lady asked me to run into the tunnel and grab a few items from the locked housing unit. My building was split into 2 side-by-side buildings connected by a tunnel underground that would transport the bodies of the deceased, so other residents didn't see it. This prevents panic attacks from our elderly patients. The tunnel had a few storage units down there, so it wasn't uncommon to need to get stock. To get into my end of the tunnel, you had to use a locked stairwell or elevator with a passcode. So I get to the tunnel and for some reason, all the other lights are out except for the red glowing emergency signs. Alright, no biggie. I turned the corner from the elevator to head up the tunnel and retrieve the items Margie needed when I see a tall black figure just swaying side to side. I approach it just in time for it to shriek at the top of its lungs, effectively prompting me to have a panic attack. She was illuminated only by the red exit signs in the dingy cement tunnel. She screamed. I screamed. Ronnie, the poor janitor from further in the tunnel, screamed. She turned out not to be a demon, but a memory patient that woke up in the night and wandered off in a daze, completely out of her mind. How she ended up in the tunnel is something I've never figured out, but after calming her down, I'm able to walk her back to her room and get settled. The attending nurse didn't even know she was missing, and I don't know how long she was down there for. After that, I avoided the tunnel for as long as I could. I used to work third shift security in a neighborhood near a university. We often encountered some weird stuff, but we mostly just dealt with drunk college bros and the like. One night, it's nearly 4 AM, so we're ending our shift and heading in when this homeless man looking for someone stops to ask me to call an ambulance. I say what's wrong. He says he's having heart palpitations and suicidal ideation. I flag down a co-worker who informs our boss and calls an ambulance. I sit down next to the guy and he's laying on the sidewalk and lets me talk to him. At first, he's saying what you'd expect from someone who wants to end it all, and it gets dark as hell then. He starts telling me about a woman he stabbed because he said he wanted $20 but she only gave him $5, so he tried to murder her. It then gets worse, saying how he's done some awful things, committing arson and horrifying stuff. And when this is happening, I'm sitting there alone with him, while my co-worker's several buildings down on the phone with the dispatcher. He then starts telling me about how his mum used to abuse him. I understand it's probably at least partially the ramblings of a mentally ill crackhead, but it was very unsettling. It's not every day a stranger confesses to you about an attempted murder and other atrocities he's committed. I'm also a young woman, so could have easily been attacked by him. I used to work for a sub shop as a delivery driver. Weirdest thing in Montana cowboy. I am located in Milwaukee, WI, so we had a diverse crowd of homeless. One night at around 1 AM, a cowboy looking dude walks into the shop. He seems just off. I can't figure out what it is, but then I realise he can't form any sentences whatsoever. All I could get out of him is his name's Ben. Ben seems like he was very drunk and had something else in his system. He kept kind of saying the same garbled mess over and over again, and I have no idea what he's saying. Me and the manager that I'm working with are pretty chill guys, so we offer him some soup and a sandwich for free. He was so happy and thankful, I think. Now while he's eating, I went out on a delivery and the car stopped at an apartment. As I'm walking up, a cowboy walks out. Not the same cowboy, but a different one. I said hello, or whatever, but he responds with the garbled mess that the guy in the shop said to me. Like same tone, everything. Even looked the same. I think this is weird, so I go back to the shop and the cowboy is still there, eating and saying nonsense. My manager then finds out that he's from Montana, so I go on another delivery, walk up the apartment building, but wait a second. There's another guy with the cowboy sitting on the stoop asking me for $1. I told him all the cash I have is for work. He said a garbled mess like the other two guys and left. Now here's a kicker. I go back to the shop and Ben is gone, so I go on my last delivery around 3 AM and pull up to a house. It's lit up inside and I can see people moving around with the shadows on the window. I knock on the door and who answers? Ben. And who's in the house with him? The two other cowboys. Ben says sup, gives me $100 bill and slams the door. I'm completely dumbfounded by this and have no idea what any of it meant to this day. A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my home. I'm a woman and was 31 at the time. I know, to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store, and the sheriff's office is about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in 8-hour shifts, and that's on a busier night. It was morning about 3:30. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute check the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had one headphone in, just kind of jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot to the sheriff's office, I can see a figure staring at me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it was like he was enjoying a piss. Against the sheriff's office though. Yeah, the building closes at 4 and isn't open again till 6 AM, but why? I can remember seeing that his shirt was ripped a bit too. He's a total creep. I can already tell he's got a buzz going. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look out the car and then at me and then back on and so forth. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I had a big half smoke and had left my dustpan outside. We both heard him start swearing angrily and seemingly engaging in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and tells me be careful. I made an awkward joke about him not being someone I wanted to see. The man was still there but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of the store. Whatever he's yelling is completely unlegible. He was obviously off his head on something, barely able to stand, swaying. I don't engage him, and I don't take my eyes off him. I just slowly walk back to the store. Something about his face is really bothering me. It had a kind of darkness to it and a wild look in his eyes. Now my experience during graveyard jobs have been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst. I didn't like it at all and wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go before the other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the counter on my way to the doors when I saw he'd walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying no, we're closed. I shook my head pointing to the sign. He then began walking away but was starting to scream now. I don't mean he was screaming at me, but completely off his head, violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong night shift job. I got really screwed up. I decided to call the cops. It's a good thing too, because the minute I hang up, he comes over again to the door, pulling it, trying to yank it open. kicking it and ramming it, screaming at me. I'm terrified now. I made the mistake of telling him that I had the cops and it's over for him. I say I made the mistake because he took off and the police never found him. They drove around the whole building and the surrounding neighbourhoods for over an hour, but find no one. He was on foot, so I don't know where he's went. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, they couldn't do anything. I was saved behind thick glass doors that are locked for the rest of my shift, but I had to quit shortly thereafter, knowing he was still out there.